Welcome to Page to Pulse, the emotional heartbeat behind the story. I'm your host, Allison Collins. Welcome to Page to Pulse, the emotional heartbeat behind the story. I'm your host, Allison Collins. Joining Page to Pulse today is Denasha Harrison, a 20-year United States Marine Corps veteran, industrial security analyst, and host of the Denasha Harrison Talk Show.
I'm happy to be here to share with you and, of course, share with you what I took away from the film. I know when we talked before, we spoke about what the significance of a film like that would be to include one of the films that inspired me to actually join the Marine Corps. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you and sharing with all of you.
Yeah, the movie Saving Private Ryan is a very powerful and intense film that depicts war. And especially the scene, the D-Day scene. What did that scene do for you?
Right. I believe the scene that you're referring to was the landing, right?
Yes.
So D-Day, during the landing of Omaha Beach, first of all, I was already in the Marine Corps for several years before that film came out. And we actually, it was called PME, Primary Military Education. So we had to actually get together as a unit to go and watch this movie because, as you said, it was a very, and still is a very powerful movie depicting war. And, whether it's planes, ships, or people, war tends to stay the same. The different things about war that changes is the technology on how we fight it, right? So I believe it's still a very powerful movie that really hits on a lot of things. One of the things that I got out of it was the courage that it took for people who were put in those positions to actually follow orders to, for example, Matt Damon's character is Private Ryan. The fact that a unit was sent to specifically get him because his brothers were killed and still along these lines, where you have multiple family members in combat, serving in combat, for that to be such a total loss to one family, it can be very devastating. So even to this day, I believe the military has a rule about putting both family members in the same theater of operations when it comes to combat, things of that nature. So the courage that was displayed by Tom Hanks' unit to actually have to change how they would usually operate, and instead of fighting the enemy, they had to actually go on a mission to extract Private Ryan from the front that he was fighting at. I think that displays an amount of courage, a different type of courage, because that's something that would not be considered the norm when it comes to a combat environment. From what I can relate to in that movie, out of all the things that were going on, the things that I can relate to concerning that movie was courage under fire, or courage to continue with the mission, no matter how hokey or crazy or unorthodox that you think something would be when it comes to following orders.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the film, what details when it comes to sights, sounds, and emotions that really stood out for you in the film?
Sights, sounds, and emotions. Sights of, again, they did an amazing job, I believe, but the being under fire, things not being audible at times. I've never had the experience of having bombs blow up next to me and having that focus after the fact, depicting the actual experiences of soldiers in that movie being under fire. I've been under fire before.
Okay.
I
Speak
believe
about that. Where were you?
very generally, I'll
Okay.
speak about it. Things get more heightened. Your awareness gets more defined. So, for example, greens become more green.
What do you mean by that?
Like the color green becomes more pronounced in your mind. The things that you see, things actually become more, if you will. Time actually does slow down. The things that your body has to pay attention to, the things that your mind has to pay attention to, the mind and the body has a interesting way of focusing on your needs in that moment to help you get through the situation. And I think concerning the movie, they did a
Now, in the movie, Spielberg uses the handheld camera to capture the intense scenes
okay.
and during combat. So is that more accurate a portrayal of how the confusion and fear is experienced on the battlefield?
Well, I think that I'm not I don't do film or anything like that. I think that the way that they approach the film uh, was probably as realistic as you can make it with some of the views of it being like I don't know the terminologies because again, I'm not a film major or anything like that, but it just seemed more personal. It seemed that it was more through the eyes of the actor. And I would say that instead of getting a nice cut up, edited shot of different types of situations being choreographed, I'm not sure if they chose longer shots or more personal handheld camera shots to capture everything. I would think that that would make more sense because in those combat situations, you would find yourself noticing details that you wouldn't normally in a non-stress environment. In a high stress environment, as I said, things get very defined. If you look at Saving Private Ryan or any movie like it, I'm sure that you'll probably find details watching it, multiple times that you didn't see previously. And I think that things are realistic like that when it comes to, outside of the film situation. There's just certain things that you catch when you have when you have a high stress environment.
So how important is it to you and other veterans for Hollywood to get it right when it comes to the realism of war?
I think it's very important for people to get it right. And I think that when you say get it right, you're referring to just portrayal, right, of the story and the realism, which has as it's a huge onion to peel back, right?
Okay.
But you're trying to communicate the story of these people who have been through so much because there are certain words that cannot explain what a person's been through.
Okay.
Like if you have um, a scene of a bayonet. Like I think in scene one of the scenes, you had a German soldier who killed an American soldier. That scene of the bayonet slowly pushing into the skin of the soldier while the other just watched because they were paralyzed with fear. I believe that those type of those sort of details are important because in Hollywood, when you hear the punch or when you hear the gunfire or when you hear the explosion, it's so over the top because you're trying to convey a message to the one that's watching from the Marines' perspective or soldier, sailor, airman. From their perspective, it's not all the booms and the bangs and I believe that whatever they did with the pyrotechnics, whatever they did with the sound effects for that type of film was as real as it gets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to take a pause right here and we're going to come back. We're going to be talking about brotherhood and leadership in this particular segment. So with brotherhood and leadership, how was that depicted in the film and how realistic is that for you as a veteran? What is the camaraderie like for you and other veterans?
So from my personal experience, in the Marine Corps, leadership comes in a lot of forms, shapes. I think Captain Miller was his name in Saving Private Ryan, correct? I think that he did a wonderful job depicting just a certain style of leadership. You have different types of leaders for different types of occasions and times. I was an enlisted person. Captain Miller's a commissioned officer in the film. And so whether you're a staff non-commissioned officer like myself or whether you're a commissioned officer like the character Captain Miller, there's a sergeant major, a first sergeant in the film. He had more of an authoritarian style of leadership. Captain Miller, I think, had more persuasive style of leadership.
Yeah, he was more of a quiet leader.
Right.
Too.
So they kind of balance each other out.
Mhm.
And I believe that it just takes all types. It's
Right.
just so from my perspective, again, speaking about the movie, I think Captain Miller's portrayal of someone in charge of so many different personalities, so many different talents, and so many different personalities. It takes that type of leader. And then in the case of, I think he was a sergeant major. He's either sergeant major or first sergeant, but I can't recall that gentleman's name. But as the senior staff non-commissioned officer, um, in that film, he had more of an authoritarian style because when the stress got high, he had to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And so sometimes you need to display different styles of leadership, leadership traits and leadership principles, whether it's the Army or the Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy. We have different interpretations of leadership traits, styles, and principles, but they're along the same lines. They're in the same lane. What do you apply to not only yourself, but those that you have to lead, especially in a combat situation? What do you apply at the time it's necessary to apply those traits or principles? And how do you apply it in a combat situation that is forever changing?
Now, there's a line where Miller says, "This mission is a man's duty." Do you interpret that to mean something else? What do you interpret that as in the context of military service?
So I think he was, I want to say he was referring to the mission of going to get Private Ryan and bringing him home. I believe that takes many forms. Sometimes your duty is not going to be normally what you've been trained to do or what you've set out to do. And as I said before, things are constantly changing, especially on the battlefield. So I believe that comment of this mission being a man's duty is simply that. It's just something that ourselves, but beyond what we sometimes don't agree with, comprehend, or understand. Like some of the people probably didn't comprehend, could not comprehend or understand why they would be put in a position to sacrifice their time, the ultimate sacrifice, their lives for one individual. But the actual purpose of getting Private Ryan and his family superseded a lot of people's understanding, a lot of people's preference, of course, but some people just probably couldn't wrap their head around it. But I think overall, Captain Miller understood the importance of getting Private Ryan back home to his family to help make his family whole. I think that it's important to understand that, if one person goes back to one family to make that family whole because of the losses that they've experienced during such a horrible time, that family can help with the fabric of community. That community can help with the fabric of, just building a better villager. That speaks volumes to our nation at the time and to this day when it comes to leadership that's actually capable. When it comes to leadership that actually has empathy, that it's important that we understand that it's not just about boots on the ground. It's not just about putting people in harm's way for an objective. It has a lot to do with the families that are here that have supported the person that's fighting for this country, because so I can't do anything of myself. I had to have the support of my family in order to survive.
Right.
20 plus years in the Marine Corps. If it wasn't for the support of my family, whether it's directly or indirectly, the support of my community, whether directly or indirectly, even if someone doesn't grow up with a mother, they get caught up in a court case. And back, I went in 91. Before the judge to say either you go to jail or you go to the army, it was an option that the judicial system, that the civil system gave for people who needed more options than just being incarcerated. Even that's a support system. So I believe that we need those support systems around us to accomplish the missions and goals that help to keep that this is a man's duty, our mission that we have. That's not the normal mission. It's our duty to look beyond the enemy, look beyond the combat situation, and actually look forward to what helps to make a family whole. Because after all, that's what and who we're fighting for.
Now, at the time when you were in the Marines, were there many women in the Marines at that time?
More when I retired and when I came in. I went in 1991. And of course, I stand on the shoulders of all the people that came in before me. Mm. I can call out some names that made the sacrifices during my time before me in the 80s, but and then even before that. But So
we're going to take a pause here, and we're going to come back and talk more with Denasha Harrison. Come back to Page to Pulse with Denasha Harrison. We're going to talk now about the impact of war. Now, many veterans have said watching Saving Private Ryan was emotionally difficult for them. And I was wondering, is there any experiences that you can relate to from war?
I think that's a great question. And I think it comes in many different forms and it's different for a lot of people. Outside of Chicago, you experience PTSD, so it doesn't just come, in the form of being in the Marine Corps in my case, or being in certain situations in my case. I think that PTSD is more addressed now than it used to be. Like in the case of maybe some of your family members, some of mine. I had some Korean War vets in my family, and they used to call it, they used to shot, right? It was presence, a huge support system to address number one, what we really didn't understand as much as we do now. I believe there's certain ways of how you deal with PTSD. I still don't believe a lot of people get the help that they need. In my case, I believe we all have a touch of PTSD concerning, my time in the Marine Corps. I just spoke about this on Veterans Day at an assisted living facility. We're used to being in what we call that bubble. In that bubble, you have not only an understanding of what your day to day is going to be, but you have a support system that you've trained for, that you've trained with your brothers about, your sisters about, or with, and you have your equipment, your gear, you know the objective, you know the mission, and if the mission changes, if the objectives change, you've learned to adapt to 'em. So it's not so much as rising to the occasion, but it's about falling back on your training.
Right.
And so when you fall back on your training, you have that system. After you get out, I know I'm speaking for myself, you feel a sense of nakedness, not just physically because of the things that you no longer have, to support your mission, but emotionally because you don't have that support system that you've been living in for so long. I was in the Marine Corps for over 20 years. I was in Operation Iraqi Freedom 1, 2, and 3. I've experienced some things that no one should ever have to experience. But I had a system of, I had a network that I was a part of for so long. So from 17 years old to 37, I say from barely 18 to barely 38, there was a bubble. And then when you come out of the Marine Corps, in my case, or others when you come out the military, some adapt better than others. Some, because of the different jobs that you had in the military, some of those jobs transition better on the outside. But there's still a form of things that we go through as veterans. For myself, it was a lot of survivor's guilt.
About that.
Well,
Survivor's guilt.
Well, I think that people just feel like they could do more. You wonder why I'm still here, and other people that you feel should still be here are no longer here.
Right.
People that you feel much more, morally better than you, have more to give or show. Sometimes you feel the burden of not dying with them or not sacrificing as they have. And like I like I said, I spoke with some veterans on Veterans Day, and one of the veterans shared with me that he doesn't feel like his time was significant enough, and that his contributions weren't enough. And I just shared with him how I get through that. The way I get through it is to try to live my life, not for someone else, but try to live my life in a much fuller way, uh, in a much fuller form because of their sacrifices. And it's a struggle. I'm sure I'm not alone, but it's a struggle. You look at your life, you look at what you could do better, that you struggle with, but just like you were in that bubble with those who are no longer here, the fact that they're no longer here in the physical, you can use that to go towards what I call that dark door of depression, or you can use that to kind of help push you to continue to be present and continue to be a better person and accomplish more things.
So you totally can relate to the psychological aftermath of the film and what you experienced after leaving war and combat experience that you had. So that is pretty much an accurate depiction in the movie then.
Yeah, I believe that Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Matt Damon, and everybody else involved, I don't have a list of names, but I believe that everybody that was involved in that film did their due diligence and did their homework. And I believe that all those people that I mentioned don't know them personally, would love to meet them.
Love to.
Don't
Tom Hanks, if you're hearing this,
don't
I want you to give me a call.
don't know them
Steven
personally.
Spielberg.
Right. But I believe that based on the work that they've done in the past, that they have a pulse on the reality of what people go through. I mean, they're people too, different pay grades, pay ranges. But I believe that they have a pulse on what makes sense or what's important, right? I've been watching Tom Hanks since a show called Bosom Buddies.
Yes, same here.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I feel like they have a pulse on, and then of course Steven Spielberg.
Yes.
That's Steven Spielberg. But I believe that they have a pulse um, on what's important to not only individuals, right, but what's important to the moral fabric of our nation. Not trying to sound corny, but what's important to the moral fabric of our nation, and how film is important to relating to successes, struggles of the everyday Joe.
Right. And I love the fact that there's a lot of filmmakers that are out there that are making these films that depict the experiences of veterans. My grandfather served in the Army, Navy, Marines, and he was in the Korean War, like your family. And my Uncle Jimmy, my Uncle Marshall, they were in Vietnam, experienced the war, and Uncle Derek, Desert Shield, Storm. My brother was in the Iraq War. So we have a lot of family members that served in the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. My brother was a 20-year veteran. He's a 20-year veteran, Army years and 1 year in the Air Force. So I commend all the service that all the family members that served. My aunt Green served in the Army. She was a medic. And we just are very thankful, for all the service men and women. And I just want to let you know that I'm so happy that you got a chance to come on here. And in closing, I did want to just ask you to say any type of departing words before we get into that you may want to offer to those who may be seeking a career in the military. I want to see if you have any departing words that you want to share with them.
I believe that my time in the Marine Corps was predestined, right? That's where I belong. That's how we've never been one. And we're not going to get into the rivalries of, the different services, because we all play our part. We all do our part. So I'm going to kind of stay away from that. Right. Although the Marine Corps birthday ball celebration was November 10th, we're 250 years old, right? We're very fanatical about being Marine, join the Marine. But anyway, not to get, but I feel like it's important to have options. I believe that I had a wonderful support system. The majority of my family was Army, so I was Army bound. When my aunt,
I signed up for the Army.
right, when she found out I was going to the Marine Corps, she tried to put all stops on everything, like, hold up, you're supposed to be going in this direction. Just to share, one of the reasons I went to the Marine Corps was because didn't try to sell the Marine Corps to me. He didn't put down any other services. He wasn't talking smack about how this was better than that. He just simply let me know that they were different. They do things different, and that it's not for everybody. And I know for me, that was the challenge, the fact that it wasn't for everybody. I walked into my destiny at that point. The advice that I would give to anybody that's considering the military in any type of capacity is that you'll never understand the amount of sacrifice that you will be asked to give. And how many 17-year-olds, how many 18-year-olds understand what sacrifice really is at that point?
Right.
And so my advice would be to talk to someone who has made the sacrifice, talk to that veteran or that active duty member that your family knows, and get their point of view. It doesn't mean that their point of view is going to fit yours. It doesn't mean that that's the way that you should go, but just do your research, because it is a huge sacrifice. I believe that it's a very noble sacrifice. I believe that you should not base your views of wanting to serve off of any type of administration. Don't let that discourage you. I believe that there's no serve your country, but I do also believe that you can serve your country in many ways. If you're not able to serve your country as a service member in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard, if you can't serve in that capacity, find some other way to serve, because it's very important that you do something that's asking you to do beyond who you are. You should always do something, even after you've gotten out of the military. Try to find some form of service to serve others, and do things beyond what serves your purpose or yourself. So I know that's a mouthful, but that's what I would say.
I think it's so important. I know the school that I used to work at, the students have, in order to meet their graduation requirements, they're required to complete a certain number of hours in the community, serving your community in some capacity. I think it's so important. And I think that's a requirement for most schools now, for high school students, that before they graduate, that they do community service. And you're right. I think community service is another form of serving your country.
I think it speaks volumes, and then it gives back a lot. There's many things I think you can get out of service, but I believe one of the things that serving others prepares you for is a form of empathy.
Yes.
And I believe empathy in our society is very
something that we're missing in this country.
well, and I would agree with that when it comes to what we're presented with social media, with news cycles. You see those examples of lack of empathy, but follow along those lines. I think media is very communication and very, especially on young minds. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I think people would get out of service is developing empathy for things that are not usually something that they would encounter, which I think.
Appreciate you coming on my very first podcast for Page to Post.
Is this your first podcast?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
and,
didn't know that.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to thank you by giving you this book, this Marines book.
Okay.
And hope you enjoy this.
Okay, wow. Okay, so this is a book from the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation that says The Marines. Absolutely. So thank you very much for this book.
You're welcome. And thank you for being a guest on Page to Post.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And tune in to the Denasha Harrison Show.
Plug
I got to plug it, but we'll talk more about that. I'm actually going to have her on the Denasha Harrison Show at some point when I start my podcast back up. I'm really looking forward to you coming on to the show. If you have time, we could talk more about this, more about PTSD and
our families and
things like that. Yeah.
In the military. Okay.
So
Thanks for listening to Page to Pulse. I'm Allison Collins, and it's been an honor exploring the stories that ignite the screen and leap off the page. If today's episode moved you, follow and leave a review. Until next time, keep turning pages, keep watching closely, and never stop chasing the story.